You are listening to the Tricorder Transmissions, episode 101. And now, here are Craig and Jeff.
Welcome to episode 101 of the Tricorder Transmissions. We're back again with our second episode of the animated series, Yesteryear. We are your hosts, Jeff Hewlett.
And Craig Cohen.
And tonight we are joined by a very special guest for this commentary track and after discussion. Friend of the show and a longtime contributor, Mr. Chris Ritzer is back. How you doing, Chris?
Hello, what's up? Thanks for having me on again.
No, our pleasure. Our pleasure. It's always great. And I think this is a pretty significant episode of the animated series. So I think it warrants having an extra set of eyes and ears on this one. So there's a lot of stuff going on here that is very much worth talking about. But we're going to save a lot of that until after the episode is over. So we're going to do the commentary first, and then we're going to launch into all of the really interesting meat of the topic right afterwards. So this episode aired on September 15th of 1973. It was the second official TAS episode to air, although it was actually the first in some markets. And the reason for that, this is funny, I'll just mention this up front. The reason why it was actually aired first on the West Coast is because George Takei was running for office. And
equal time laws?
It was equal time laws, so they couldn't run the actual first episode first because he had dialogue in it. Isn't that ridiculous? Awesome. Yeah, I thought that was kind of a funny little tidbit. But this one is written by DC Fontana, so very cool that one of the most prolific writers of the original series is here for the animated series. This start date for this is 5373.4, although we do go back in time through the Guardian to the Vulcan of the past. So are you guys ready to start this commentary?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. So everybody out there, get your DVDs, your YouTubes, your Netflix, your whatever's queued up, and we are going to start our commentary track in 3, 2, 1. All right. There's our Starfield.
I absolutely love the music in the beginning of the animated series. It is it's kind of like a cool riff on the original music a little bit, and with that 70s swinging vibe to it. It's pretty grooving.
Yeah, it's one of those things I think where they were like, okay, let's get as close as we can without getting sued.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think Craig and I briefly talked about how much we like the music, but I think they did a really damn good job with it. So I never actually skip this when I'm watching these episodes. I listen to it every time.
Yeah, neither do I. So we had gotten an interesting comment after our first episode discussion went up from Richard Jenkinson about how in the UK, Jeff, they used to put the stingers after the opening titles in the original series.
Yeah, that really threw me for a loop. I never knew that.
Yeah,
I never ever knew that.
Very little bit of trivia there about how people watch things over on the other side of the pond.
Yeah. So go ahead, Craig.
No, you go. I was just gonna basically say that I think it's really interesting that they start utilizing the Guardian for research purposes.
Yeah, I think we speculated when we did our City on the Edge of Forever commentary, why would they not utilize this incredible utility? I mean, it just seems like there's so much you could do with this that they'd be silly not to go back there and keep using it.
And again,
I like the use. Oh, I'm sorry.
Now they're totally going overboard with it.
Oh, yeah. And again, I like the use of a creature that we wouldn't have seen on the original series.
Yeah, and it's another one of those situations where they just throw this creature in without identifying him or giving us any backstory whatsoever. We're just supposed to accept now that these alien creatures are part of Starfleet. So you saw what's his name, Arex, with his third arm in the last episode. And now we got this gold eagle dude who speaks English.
Mm-hmm. Or it could be the universal translator at play, though.
Oh, that's possible too. That's possible too. And this really threw me for a loop too, Chris. And I know you know a lot more about some of this stuff than we may, but an Andorian Starfleet member?
Oh yeah, definitely. Certainly, yeah. They I guess a little bit after Enterprise ends, I think they join up and they start integrating their fleets a little bit. So by then, yeah, they should be full-fledged integrated.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool. You wonder why you didn't see any on the original series then.
I have makeup.
Something that really made me sad was they really do Spock's family really dirty in that alternate timeline. Not only does Spock get killed, but his mom dies in a shuttle crash.
Yeah.
Like, ow, man. It's tough.
Well, that's a good thing Vulcans don't have emotions, so
yeah.
The dad wasn't really that bummed out. I'm sure it was business as usual when he woke up the next day.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Oh, look at this poor dopey guy on the screen, man.
He looks like he hates his life.
Yeah. That must be one of those James Doohan voices, I think, huh?
Definitely sounds like it.
Yeah. And here's Sarek in animated form.
Good likeness.
Yeah, very good likeness. And I believe we're going to get Mark Leonard back to do the voice here.
Yes, it was really cool to see they got him back. And they got a couple characters back, I think, to do voice acting that did some guest appearances too. So it's nice they at least made an attempt.
Yeah, Roger Carmel came back.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what's his name that played Cyrano Jones comes back too. Why is his name escaping me right now? Yeah, it'll come to me at some point. But I love that flyby. And look, check that boar. That bird needs to eat a sandwich. That thing is so stick thin. My God. And what is this uniform that this female officer's wearing? It is definitely not the uniforms we're used to seeing Starfleet females wearing.
No, it almost looks like a Next Generation kind of thing.
It does.
Is she actually with Starfleet? Maybe she's part of the science lab.
Yeah, good call.
That's what I was thinking too, Chris. So there's no single entity that has sort of control of the Guardian and how it's utilized. I love how Spock has a hard time remembering the name of his cousin.
Yeah.
It just seems so unlike Spock.
Yeah, he has clear recollections of some of it, but not other parts of it. But
yeah, like the name of the person that saved his life.
Can we address the elephant in the room as well? This is probably one of the most egregious time paradoxes I think I've ever seen. If the original Spock died when he was 7 years old, how could he go back and save himself later? That doesn't make sense.
We'll have to call in Doc Brown on this one.
Well, I think this also really speaks to the idea of alternate timelines in Star Trek. So this is more a matter of writing things for the Spock on this timeline. Because in the opening log, didn't Kirk say something about this is where all the timelines converge?
Yes. Yeah.
So that was my kind of takeaway on it, was that something had affected, for whatever reason, the outcome of Spock's life on this timeline. The prime, if you want to call it the prime timeline.
The prime timeline. Well, I wish I guess maybe it's a byproduct of the shows being so short they can't really explore too much, but I really wish they would have actually shown you something happen that changed the timeline. I don't know what, but
yeah. I would agree. It seemed like a little bit of a cheat to just say, "Oh, something must have happened," especially when Kirk's like, "Hey, we went out of our way to make sure everything was cool."
Yeah, really.
This is what happens when you're constrained to just 22 minutes or whatever it is. If you go to like a full hour, you could definitely get more to the story.
Oh, for sure. And I love how the Enterprise has a wardrobe department, by the way. So now I guess we can say that Spock is 37 Earth years old. If he's going back 30 years to when he was 7 years old.
Yeah, which seemed really weird for me, and I don't know if Chris, you can speak to this more based on your knowledge, but it always seemed to me that Spock was a lot older.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I guess not.
Mhm.
So I guess we definitively know his age now.
So did you guys happen to notice that there's a serious difference in the way the Guardian works in the animated series and the way it worked in the original series? Remember in the original series, Spock had to record what was going on in the Guardian and tell him precisely when to jump to get where they wanted to go.
Yeah.
And in this one, the Guardian just pulls up the thing and he just walks right through.
Well, maybe the Guardians just become more agreeable.
Oh, perhaps. And here's the scene that's pretty much borrowed from directly in the 2009 Trek movie.
Mm-hmm.
With the three kids bullying Spock, although Spock's violence in the 2009 movie is much more successful.
Yeah, and also minus the weird gear they're wearing.
Yeah, I scratch my head at this children's wear. But I think it's really cool. This is the first time we're seeing a Vulcan city. I love the fact that the animated series really pushes forward and tries to develop new things that we haven't seen before.
Oh, yeah. And I guess that gets back to a lot of the talk we had online and offline about, the canonical nature of this series. And again, I think we both determined that there's nothing that's incredibly damaging that occurs in these episodes. And I think this is an episode that's a really, really good example of that. There's a handful of things that I take issue with, but I also think the meat of the issue or the meat of the episode really sort of contributes to the overall importance of Spock's story and sort of, adding weight to that character.
I completely agree with you. And I had a side note to mention that although this the animated series had been officially decanonized, they reversed their decision just for this episode. This is the only episode they consider canon out of the entire original animated series. Which I don't know how you can canonize one episode of a series.
I think it's all canon. It's the hell with those licensing things and all that went down. It's poppycock.
Well, we got a 3-way agreement here on the canonical nature of this series. So,
well, and especially now, if you think about, with the 2009 movies and the idea of, these alternate timelines, why not just even, if you want to be cheap, say this is just another alternate timeline.
Yeah, there you go.
Another good likeness here, by the way.
Yeah, unfortunately, the original voice actress couldn't come back, so it's actually Majel Barrett who's doing the voice. So she does a good job, though.
Yeah, I didn't catch that.
Yeah. So another nod with that 2009 movie gave the young Spock actually gets the choice between the Vulcan way and the human way in this episode, just as he did in the 2009 movie. So I kind of like that they kept that. Although I'm glad they didn't keep his outfit.
It's really absurd.
It really is. It almost looks like did either of you guys have the safety patrol when you were in elementary school?
Yes.
Those were the belts we used to wear.
Yeah. And the other thing about it is there's nothing logical about that outfit.
No.
No, not at all. So now I found this also quite interesting that the test that Spock is going to have to go through is to survive 10 days without food or water in the desert. So that must mean that Vulcan physiology is really, really different than that of people. There's no way a human child could survive 10 days in the desert without food and water. So apparently this is what all Vulcan male children go through.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I would imagine the majority of them survive. So, quite interesting. Sarek, do you guys think Sarek is kind of a dick?
Yes.
I mean, he's really rough on poor young Spock there. But this is really neat. I love that DC wrote all of this backstory for Spock and wrote all of this lore and these rituals. And I think this is fantastic stuff. And I really, really wish they didn't give this series such a hard time. Yeah.
Now, I only wish there was a backstory to how Ichaya lost part of his tooth.
I think all saber-toothed animals in these old cartoons all had a broken tooth, didn't they?
It was just too tempting to draw it with a broken one.
Yeah. Well, didn't all the Hanna-Barbera ones have them too?
Yeah.
They all had to have them.
This is another thing that annoys me a little bit, is Spock not realizing that it wasn't the actual test and it was a trial run.
Yeah. That seems like another big memory gap. I like that Ichaya is kind of like part cat, part dog almost.
Yeah.
Like it has both cat and dog-like qualities to it.
Well, the size of a bear.
Yes, while being the size of a bear. It's quite large.
And at what point do they hit desert? Or is that...
Isn't the whole thing desert?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, but it's not... Is it not colored like Earth desert?
Well, it is nighttime.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Now, here's a question for you guys. So didn't Sarek just say earlier that Vulcan has no crime? So why would there be authorities to notify? If they have no crime, there's still Vulcan police. They're just kind of hanging around just in case the kid gets kidnapped.
A Godzilla voice cameo, by the way.
Oh.
Now, doesn't that cat here look just like Cringer from He-Man?
He kind of does. A little skinnier.
But they took the Godzilla roar, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was the Godzilla noise, wasn't it?
Yeah. And what, is that a double nerve pinch?
Yeah, he laid it on thick to knock that thing out. Lamatia. Yeah. Poor Ichaya.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. I never realized the neck pinch was such an important thing for the child to learn. I just... Did you guys ever think that was such a big deal? Like,
I always thought it was kind of, part of your genetic makeup as a Vulcan.
Yeah. Does that mean that not all Vulcans can do it?
That's the implication.
Yeah. So now you guys, do you think, most of this episode probably couldn't have been done as an original series episode, especially that beast fight.
Almost certainly not.
Yeah. They could have found other ways around that, though. You could have gotten a guy in a gorilla suit.
That's true.
Or there's nothing. Aside from the Birdman at the beginning of this episode, there's nothing too outrageous in this episode aside from Ichaya. I think some of the landscapes might be a little, too grand, but
could have been Vasquez Rocks. Well, the city thing, they might have had it done on a smaller scale.
Yeah.
They might have just done some building interiors or something.
Yeah, with a nice matte painting.
Yeah.
Oh, Ichaya.
This is actually a very deep subject matter for a cartoon that was potentially aimed at children.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the whole euthanasia thing. In fact, the network actually wanted them to take the euthanasia part out.
Really?
Yeah. So they thought it was too disturbing for children, and DC Fontana didn't want to take it out, and Roddenberry took her side, pushed back on the network, and they actually got to leave it in. And from what I had read, it seems like they got absolutely no complaints about it. There was never a letter written. And in fact, I think there was an interview with DC Fontana where she said no one really had ever asked her about it either.
Mm-hmm.
They never really brought it up. But
I think for the most part, too, the audience was always more of a mature, older audience.
Yeah.
And because the reason the show got canceled was because it didn't get ratings amongst young kids. So,
Can you imagine some of the goofy nonsense we might have seen had they tried to appeal to that younger audience?
Oh boy, yeah, there were some bad ideas about that I was reading, and I'm glad that Roddenberry held his ground and said no, and it's otherwise it could have been bad.
You guys like that little emotional moment Spock had with Ichaya there? Old Spock? I thought that was kind of nice that he kind of let his human side out a little bit and empathized with this pet that didn't die in the original timeline.
Yeah, that's another thing that I was really sort of curious about is why wouldn't they have had Ichaya die in the original timeline? And what is different this time that would cause it? Again, it seems like it's a change in time when there was really nothing that caused it.
That's a good observation. I hadn't thought about that.
It almost seems like DC Fontana was trying to set up something that might have been, pulled out later on as like some kind of reveal for a story point down the line.
Yeah, you might be onto something there because, you can't even say there was really not, unless the timing of young Spock leaving the house was different or something, and it just so happened that other beast was kind of in the pathway this time around. I'm not sure. I love that Vulcans have flying cars, by the way. That's pretty neat. Yeah. But it's a good rite of passage for young Spock. He's kind of proving himself here, taking on the danger of running all the way to the healer's house on his own. But did you guys think it was a little bit weird that healer guy automatically assumed that young Spock was playing a practical joke?
Yeah, especially considering that, Vulcans aren't really known for their humor.
No, and I guess he's, just because of they're playing on the hell half human thing again, but he said he heard about humans playing practical jokes. So he just assumes that the human half of young Spock would be playing a pretty horrible practical joke, actually. If that was a joke, that would be pretty nasty. Poor pet dying in the middle of the desert. Wow, that's a tough choice for a kid to make, man.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what? Earlier in the episode, he was calling him fat and old.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Again, I think the euthanasia thing is actually kind of fitting because, we had some deep topics in TOS, and it seems like it fits.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't seem like anything was, out of the ordinary with that story point. It's interesting that there was so much behind the scenes stuff associated with it.
Yeah, I guess the networks are traditionally very sensitive, but do you think this is another one of those like Back to the Future type moments where Marty's in the stairwell with his future mom and dad talking about setting fire to the living room rug, and they never recognize him later in life. Like you would think, you would think that his parents would remember that guy, that helped them get together, and that you'd think that Sarek would recognize Spock later on in life. Like, wait a minute, you look a heck of a lot like a cousin of mine.
Maybe he did, but it'd be illogical to inform Spock of what's going to happen. So maybe now we could talk to him like after this point, like once he's gone through everything. That would be like, okay, cool. Now we can talk about not going to pollute the timeline anymore.
And why is Kirk such a douche? He's like so dismissive. Like Spock's like a pet died, and Kirk's like a pet. Get out of here. Who cares?
Yeah, I mean, but at this point, Kirk's like, that pet's been dead for 30 years, man. Let it go.
Well, everything's back to normal. McCoy's busting balls again. I love all these similarities to the original series. This is great stuff.
Yeah, it definitely has the same vibe as the original series. It's the only difference pretty much is that it's animated.
Yep.
I'm actually really surprised that this wasn't a technology that was considered down the road in the 80s or 90s as an option for Trek on TV.
Oh, animating it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they had enough comic series. I mean, you would think that it would be, pretty well established that it can be drawn. I don't know. This is one of those things I was hoping that one day they'd go back and revisit these and maybe, get some CG versions of these animated shows. Seems like it's ripe for that, but who knows?
Yeah,
you mean of these actual stories, or
sure?
Yeah,
and then you can keep going after that. I mean, they only had like 1.5 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, you could take the original voice tracks.
Yeah,
and,
that's what I mean.
Yeah, you create brand new. Yeah, that would be pretty badass.
Yeah, why not? Let's see why they couldn't. But so we're drawing to a close here. The end credits are rolling. So I guess before we move on and do a little more backstory on this episode, we can talk about how we feel from an essential standpoint. And I'll just go right out there and say 100% essential vote for me on this one. I mean, the reasons are really obvious. I don't think we really have to list everything out, but the Spock backstory alone, plus everything else, and I think this is absolutely a must watch. Craig?
Yeah, I know. I would agree. I would agree. It adds so much to the overall Spock character without really introducing anything that's really conflicting with what we've seen in the original series. So yeah, it's definitely essential.
And Chris, what do you think?
Oh, this is definitely essential. You get so much backstory on Spock, and it's a really cool story. And it's nice getting Sarek back. Yeah, definitely essential.
All right, so a triple essential vote that for the first time in history, a triple essential on the Tricorder transmission. So a lot of fun watching this with you guys. You guys want to talk a little bit about some of the things that went on behind the scenes in this episode before we close up?
Yeah.
So I'll throw some stuff out. I have some notes here. I'll just throw some points out, and you guys can throw back whatever you feel like. So I didn't know this, but prior to the writing of this episode, there had been considered a young version of Spock being included as a regular character in the animated series, and as well as other child equivalents. You think it's like Trek babies? What?
Yeah, that was one of the things I was kind of alluding to earlier when I said they could have gone like really bad directions with this. Like having like little sidekicks for every character just would have been ridiculous. And I'm very happy that they were fought on that and it did not happen.
That's funny.
So DC Fontana was pretty excited about exploring Spock's formulative years, and I have a couple of little quotes here. She was talking about how she wanted to probe into the characters and seeing some of the beginning of the trouble with Spock and Sarek and Amanda's problems back then, and what made Spock Spock. She was kind of hearkening back to Journey to Babel, which I think is one of Chris's favorite episodes, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, Chris, did this animated series episode help to flesh out some of the things that were introduced in Journey to Babel for you?
Oh, yeah, certainly. It just really being able to see how things were at a younger age for Spock and just being able to see like his interactions with Sarek, it definitely helps flesh out the whole history of both the father and son and mother as well.
Craig, any thoughts on that?
No, it's good observations.
All right. So she had pitched the story. She go ahead and written it, and she pitched it to Gene Roddenberry, who pretty much immediately approved of it. And she one of the reasons was she tried to utilize animation to show a more expansive version of Vulcan than they had previously had. I mean, we'd only seen, like that desertish area that Kirk and Spock fought in, and that was pretty much the end of it. But so here's a little quote from DC Fontana about that. She says, "I was mindful of Gene Roddenberry's rule that writers must take advantage of the enormous range animation gave us in terms of sets and aliens. Animation would allow us to show the planet Vulcan in any way I saw fit. Although it had been established in a muck time that most of the planet was desert, I wanted to depict other aspects of Vulcan. We never really could show Vulcan on the original series except in a muck time. We had the ceremonial circle, a very small piece. We could show the whole planet and a lot more of it in the animation. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to do this story. I realized there was a way to tell a really nice Vulcan story in a way that would look good. It was an absolutely ideal way to show Spock's backstory because of the freedom the animation allowed us. For instance, we could show a great Vulcan city of Shikar and the surface of Vulcan Desert and the city environment of the home and the strange creatures that lived there. So I think that actually really finally encapsulates some of the things we've been saying about the potential of the animated series to do more for Star Trek. Craig, what do you think?
Yeah, no, totally agree. Totally agree. That was a great bit of insight there.
Yeah. Chris, any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I agree as well. It's just really nice being able to see them really expand and get to do things they would never normally have a chance to do.
So let's see, a couple other things. So the first draft of the script of this episode contained some extensions to scene that dealt with some aftermath where McCoy was admitting that Spock wasn't familiar to him. So in the beginning of this episode, when they come back and Spock supposedly doesn't exist in the timeline, and it led to some kind of awkward dialogue with Kirk. So there was he has a little bit of a run-in with Scotty in the transporter room where they're thinking some kind of an elaborate joke, but there was a little bit more with McCoy prior to that. So do you guys think they should have left that in, or do you think there was enough there?
I think there was a pretty good amount. I think the balance was proper.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree with Craig on that.
All right. So also in the first draft of the script, Chekhov was actually part of it. But of course, they wound up having to take him out and put this Bates guy in instead, who replaced Chekhov's role in the story since Walter Koenig was not going to be involved in the animated series. Do you guys miss Chekhov, or do you not mind that he's not there?
I miss him, and I kind of mind it, and I kind of feel like, they should have been able to find money somewhere to get him involved. I'm sure he didn't ask for much. He wouldn't have asked for much.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I agree too. Yeah, I don't think he would have gotten that much to do it, and yeah, they could have made it happen if they wanted to.
I guess instead he got to write one of the episodes.
Yeah, big whoop.
Which we'll be seeing a little bit later. So actually, a really cool little tidbit about the recording of the voice acting for this episode. Apparently, this was the first time that the cast had reunited since the filming of the original series ended in January of '69. So this recording was done at Filmation Studios in Reseda, California in June of '73. So it also included the recordings of Beyond the Farthest Star and More Trouble. So this is kind of cool that the backstory of this episode features the reuniting of most of the original series cast.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's cool, because I know, like, for a lot of the episodes, they didn't even do that. Everyone was just off wherever they were, and they were just recording when they could. And I think, Shatner, he actually used to mail his recordings in.
Yeah, I kind of like I think they sound really cool when they're all in a room together doing the voices. So it's with the addition of this one, Mark Leonard as Sarek was only one of 3 actors, and we mentioned this. So Roger C. Carmel and Stanley Adams, Cyrano Jones were the 3 characters that 3 actors that came back to voice their characters again in the animated series. But before they actually signed Mark Leonard to come on for this episode, James Doohan was going to voice Sarek.
Of course he was.
No.
On this show. So could you imagine what Sarek would have sounded like had James Doohan voiced him?
Mm-hmm.
I can actually envision it right now in my head, and it is so scary.
Hello, young Spock.
Yes.
You must pass the test. Oh, that was the Klingon voice, though, wasn't it? That was the Klingon voice. Yeah. So yeah, we mentioned that Jane Wyatt couldn't return to voice Amanda Grayson, so Majel Barrett stepped in. Let's see here. I'm just going to see some things that we didn't mention. So this episode actually gets referenced in a few other Star Trek series. So
yes, I was going to bring that up. There's quite a few references in Deep Space Nine.
Yes. I think was it Tears of the Prophets? Change of Heart. There's a couple episodes where they bring it up.
Yes,
the Vulcan Forge is brought up in Change of Heart.
Yeah, I think Worf wants to go there or something like that for maybe their honeymoon or something. And yeah, that's it. And then there's Miranda class ship that's actually called the USS Shakar after the city. And there was something else too. I can't remember at this point in time.
Yeah, so it also shows up in the city of Shakar is mentioned in the TNG episode The Emissary. There's a holo program that's titled Shakar Desert Survival Vulcan. So definitely a direct mention. And the city is also indirectly mentioned in the Enterprise episode Fusion. There's a reference to the Shakar Academy. So it's not acknowledged there. Also, I think there's a in the Eye of the Beholder, the TNG episode references the Sepik academic scholarship. So kind of sharing its name with one of the Vulcans from this episode. So it's kind of it's out there. It's out there. So this is definitely mentioned in other shows, as well as the 2009 movie draws a little bit from this. So
yeah, it definitely seems to be the most referenced out of all the animated series episodes.
Yeah, for sure. So hard not to call this one canon. But let's see. That's kind of close to it. So do you guys have any final thoughts on Yesteryear before we close up? Craig Cohen?
I just think this episode's a really great example of what the animated series could do. When it was operating at the top of its game and really exploiting all of the potential that was there.
Yeah, Chris, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I agree with Craig there, and it's cool. Like in some upcoming episodes, yeah, they definitely start doing some things that they could never pull off, or if they tried to pull off live action, it would have been insanely difficult. And so you get some really cool stories.
Yeah, so that draws this episode of the Tricorder Transmissions to a close, and we will be back once again next Sunday with another installment of the animated series. So until then, hang tight and we'll be back with you. So Craig Cohen, awesome getting together once again.
Yeah, always good talking to you. And Chris, always enjoy when your contributions are included on this show.
Thanks again for having me on.
It's our pleasure.
All right, so if you're looking to catch up with us online, you can find us at thetricordertransmissions.com, facebook.com/thetricordertransmissions, TTT_pod on Twitter. And we also have a YouTube channel. Just search for us at Tricorder Transmissions and you'll find our series there as well. And we will see you all next week. Hi there, thanks again for listening. If you're cruising the galaxy looking for even more Trek talk, why not visit our good friends Bill and Dan over at TrekGeeks.com? They've got a great podcast that covers a wide range of Star Trek topics, so you're sure to find something you'll love. And if you're in the mood for some awesome tunes, then you really need to head over to 5yearmission.net. The guys are writing a song for every episode of the original series, and each one is absolutely brilliant. So that's TrekGeeks.com and 5yearmission.net. Check them out today.